So for our first speaker, we have Veeshesh Sunassy. Veeshesh is the president of the North American Young Generation in Nuclear and frequently goes to schools, a specific chapter, Durham chapter, right? He frequently goes to schools and universities to inspire students to join nuclear and the climate change workforce. He's also co-lead of the COP28 delivery team for Nuclear for Climate. His goal is to engage with the public and influence policymakers about the important role of nuclear in climate change discussions. Veeshesh and I have worked together on a number of projects, including educational webinars and organizing a climate activist networking event.
Reach net carbon zero. Happy to see a lot of people here today, amazing audience here and even online. And just want to start by getting a feel from the audience. And I'm going to ask two questions. The first one, by a show of hand, who thinks nuclear is clean? Most people. We don't have a lot of people to convince that. That's good. Now the second question I have, what I'm showing right now is the world map of the electricity sector and its carbon emission by country or by region. You could see there's a lot of green countries here. Who can guess what these green countries have in common in terms of their electricity mix? Shoot. Nuclear? Hydro? Nuclear and hydro, that's right. Let's see. Want to start by Finland. Guess who's there? Nuclear. 37% of the energy currently coming from nuclear. Let's look at another country. France. What's there? Nuclear again, 77%. And I want to finish with Ontario, because that's where I'm from. Ontario, 60% nuclear. So that's a good map to show you in terms of your electricity mix, what countries are clean and what they are using for their electricity generation. And just want to pause on Ontario for a second here. You could see it's 85% low carbon for its electricity generation. So I want you to keep that in mind. 85% low carbon. Yeah. 85% low carbon, which means currently Ontario's carbon emission from the electricity sector is just 2%. It's 2%, but still Ontario releases about 165 megatons of CO2 per year, namely from the building sector, the transportation sector, and the industry sector. This is an important message because decarbonizing your electricity sector is not enough. We need to think broader in terms of decarbonizing our energy sector. And just by a show of hand again, who knows the difference between your electricity sector and your energy sector? Who thinks it's the same? 2 people. Who thinks it's different? Okay. So it's an important concept because people need to understand that to understand how we can decarbonize globally. Your electricity sector basically is what you produce for your grid, for your power. Your broader energy sector, in contrast, it's your electricity sector plus your total energy supply. For example, it includes building sector, because buildings, you need heat to keep them warm. It also includes your transportation sector, because you need fuel/energy to drive a car, or you need fuel, again, /energy to fly a plane. So let's keep that in mind first. I took the example of Ontario, but now let's go globally now, what that means. Currently, we are projected to release about 50 gigatons of CO2 per year. And your energy sector is currently about 35 gigatons. And for those who don't understand what 35 gigatons mean, it's 35 billion tons of CO2. I see Dinara smiling. Billion. That's what we need to reduce to reach net carbon zero. So let's see how we have to achieve that. This is taken from the International Energy Agency Net Zero by 2050 report. And first, let's focus now what's happening. 2 things that I highlighted in a box there that we need to understand. In terms of your electricity sector, 60% of your electricity generation currently is coming from fossil fuel. In terms of your energy now, again, including your building sector and transportation sector, that number is 80%. So keep that in mind. Now, who can guess what's the share of nuclear energy in terms of electricity generation globally? 10%. There you go. Extra cookie for this guy later. So keep that in mind. Now let's see where we need to be at in 2050. Again, I'll pause there. You could see in those circles what's in terms of your sector, what's the carbon emission per these sectors. Now 2050. First thing you gotta notice, net carbon, which means 35 billion tons have to come out, right? And how are you gonna achieve that? So this is again, IAEA net zero report. Couple of things that's key to reach that net carbon zero. First, we all know, we've heard that from politicians and world leaders in the G20 meeting and also in the United Nations General Assembly. Renewable energy, your wind and solar, will play a key part and will make up to 90% of the electricity generation globally. 90%, so keep that in mind. But 3 things need to happen again. Because looking at Ontario example, it's not just enough for your electricity sector. So what are these 3 things? Low carbon hydrogen will be key in the future. Second, building will have to be zero carbon emission, and industries need to be from low emission sources. These are the things that needs to happen. And guess what source of energy can help with all these? Sorry, I'm not hearing anything? Nuclear, yeah. And we'll see how. So let's get into sector by sector. The first I want to tackle is the electricity sector. 14,000 megatons of CO2 per year. 2 things we've already seen. We've seen from the electricity map, nuclear is green, is clean and low carbon. The second thing I've mentioned, renewable will make 90% of the electricity generation. So you might be thinking, we could just reach that with wind and solar. Why do we need nuclear? This is an important question. And perhaps one of the biggest advantage of nuclear is this source of energy can complement the high integration of wind and solar in the grid to make a stable and resilient grid. And how so? So it's in terms of your flexibility requirements for your grid. And what I mean by that, we all know wind and solar are intermittent sources. They are there when it's sunny. Today I see New York is very sunny, or when it's windy. But there may be scenarios or instances in the short term, let's say for minutes or hours, where you don't have too much sun or too much wind, you end up being 2,000 megawatts short. Or in the long term, for days or weeks, you don't have any wind and solar. What needs to happen from a grid perspective, you have to have flexible capacity to take care of this shortfall, both in the short term or long term. And what are these flexible capacity? Maybe your battery storage, your pumped hydro storage, or hydrogen, which will take care when the renewable generation is not there. Now you're asking, how does nuclear comes into that? So with a higher share of nuclear as part of your electricity sector, the less are those flexible capacity that you require. In 2021, France did an excellent study where they looked at 6 different scenarios. 3 scenarios that has only 100% renewable generation, but with varying share of wind and solar. And the last 6 scenarios, they looked at with an increased share of nuclear as part of the grid. So in those scenarios, one thing that they see clearly is with an increasing share of nuclear, your flexible capacity decreases. So with nuclear, you only need 30 gigawatts of flexible capacity in terms of your storage or other hydrogen sources. Without nuclear, you would need over 70 gigawatts of flexible capacity. And some people might not know what 70 gigawatts mean. It's 70,000 megawatts. And if you think of the France grid, on most days, they only need 57,000 megawatts for their electricity generation. What that means on a grid perspective, if you have less flexible capacity required for your grid because you already have nuclear, and by the way, someone said hydro as well at the start. Hydro is another one that can decrease that. Your grid is very cost effective. And from France study, it actually shows that you save about 10 billion euros. So if you convert that to US dollars for those in American, it's even more saving per year. So this is why when we think of can we meet it by just wind and solar, the answer is no, we need more than that because we need a stable and a resilient grid. I'm going to touch on 2 other sectors. Basically, district heating. We spoke about the building sector. And buildings, again, needs heat to keep them warm. And that's where most of the carbon emissions come at. Currently, 90% of fossil fuel takes care of the global district heating requirement. And district heating is just a system to pass heat to keep your building warm. Now, how come nuclear play a part in that? Well, we all know nuclear energy produces heat. That heat can be used to heat up buildings. But this time, it's low carbon. It's a technology that's already being used. 55 different nuclear reactors across 9 countries provided district heating in 2021. And these countries include Czech Republic, Hungary, France, and Russia, and China. So this is another application nuclear can have to decarbonize that 1,200 megatons of CO2 that we are currently emitting from district heating. The next one I want to speak about is your industry sector. One of it is desalination. So desalination is the process of providing clean water for drinking purposes or irrigation. Currently, who can guess what's the share of desalination power plant that's being provided by fossil fuel? Anyone? 99%, which means it's currently emitting 250 megatons of CO2 per year. Well, nuclear can play a part in that. How? Again, nuclear, we all know, provides electricity which can be used to desalinate and power the desalination plant. But this time again, it's lower carbon emission, about 20 times less than fossil fuel. Application worldwide, it's already being used. There was 5 reactors across India and Japan that use nuclear power to desalinate their plants. This is going to be key in water-stressed areas such as the Middle East and Northern Africa. And I've laid out 2 examples here because we all know the global water demand will keep increasing by 2050. In Pakistan, for 11 years, the Karachi nuclear power plant powered desalination plant, and for that 11 years, they produced 5 million cubic meters of desalinated water. 5 million cubic meters means 5 billion liters for those who are thinking in terms of their water bottle. Egypt, Al Daba plant, who's currently being constructed, has a project for their nuclear power plant to power their desalination unit and produce about 170,000 meters of desalinated water per day. I was looking what that size in terms of a football stadium. It's about 170 football stadium per day that this water can fill. And last thing, while I wrap up, it's hydrogen. Again, I've mentioned it's a clean source, but this time, currently, most of the hydrogen that's being produced is coming from dirty sources, such as coal gasification or steam methane, natural gas reforming. For those who know the color scheme, it's called gray hydrogen. But now, nuclear, what it can do, it can produce that same hydrogen, but this time cleanly through high temperature electrolysis. This is what we call pink hydrogen. And this low carbon hydrogen can have many usage in the future. For example, you can use hydrogen to decarbonize your transportation sector, which is being looked at a global scale. You can use that clean hydrogen again from nuclear for your industry applications as well, because this time it's clean. So that's my last thing to you. If anything, I want to remember, because I passed on a lot of numbers for you, which probably it's difficult to remember everything, but 2 things I want you to remember. 35 billion tons that we need to cut. And it's not enough to just do that just from your electricity sector. We need to think broadly in terms of your energy sector. So with that, I'm going to leave you with very good resources to learn more about nuclear, that Nuclear for Climate released. And there's the QR code, and it mentioned all the different applications nuclear has to reach a net carbon zero. That's all I got. Thanks.